So the way the law is reading, it's really only those states that can exempt themselves. However, because all these states have actually created laws, like we'll look at the state of Florida here. Florida has this in the very beginning of their laws, Title I of Florida statutes, Chapter 1, definitions, and 1.01 is definitions, and 1.02 is legal time. 1.025 is the Sunshine Protection Act. Let's look at those. Can you read that okay?
I can see it. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So in all laws, statutes, orders, rules, and regulations of this state relating to the time of performance of any act by any officer or department of the state, whether in the legislative, executive, or judicial branches, doesn't that sound familiar?
Uh-huh. So they just copy to paste.
Or relating to the time within which any rights shall accrue or determine, or within which any act shall or shall not be performed by any person subject to the jurisdiction of the state, it shall be understood and intended that the said time shall be the United States standard time of the zone within which the act is to be performed or the right shall accrue or determine. So this is where the law actually is that sets the time to standard time in the state of Florida.
Right.
It wasn't this law up here.
Yep. So this at the state level, they created something.
Yeah.
And it has to be enforced at that point.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say here in Florida, we are subject to the jurisdiction of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So since the state is setting the law and they're following United States Standard Time of the zone, because the zones do apply to the whole country. They're not forcing them on you, on the states, but they do apply to the whole, all the way from Puerto Rico to Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And
in a way, I mean, the time, because of where the sun is, and the United States is such a huge land mass, in addition to all the territories and everything else, it's like, it's not like, for instance, right now, it's what, 8:19 p.m. here, and you're 11:19 p.m.
Right.
Like to me, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I think the whole business of changing to standard time and all of that gets a little bit of an overreach. But anyway, that's just me, and I'm still just learning and a student to what you're teaching here. So please keep going.
No, definitely. I agree. I agree. And so the state of Florida could have exempted themselves from the daylight savings time. Actually, yeah, this is the place they would have had to do that. They didn't actually have to, but because they're going by United States time zone, they could have set some other way of expressing it. Instead of going by the United States Standard Time Zone, they could have said they could have followed the pattern of the Coordinated Universal Time. That of the second zone would be 5 hours less. That's the Eastern Standard Time. So they could have just said the standard time of Florida shall be Coordinated Universal Time retarded by 5 hours. That's it. They could have just said that. And then we wouldn't have the daylight saving time. And now, not only do they have to do something like that, but they have to repeal this law, Sunshine Protection Act. Did you know, have you ever heard about the fact that the U.S. Senate has actually passed a bill to make daylight savings time permanent?
I did not know that, no.
So that we're always off, we're always off kilter. Midnight would always be when the sun is off, and noon would always be where the sun is off by an hour.
Now, do you think that, I don't know. I don't want to get into too much like controversy here, but it seems like meddling of the federal government in our individual lives is not always in our best interest. And so, and actually we started this talk with the little description that we want to recalibrate our clocks, like our biological clocks, our rhythms to match nature's rhythms. So it's like the government is encouraging us to live in an unnatural way by observing time in this constraint or this limited view.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Senate has passed that bill, and they're just waiting for the that bill is going to, if they pass it, has to go through the House of Representatives, and then if they pass it, then it has to be signed by the president.
And so that means we won't be changing the clocks anymore. It's just the one time zone all year round.
Which would be some advantage, except for the fact that it's not standard time. It's not, it would be daylight savings time all year round.
Yeah, right.
Which to me, it just doesn't make any sense at all. If you're gonna change the time so that it's the same all year round, why not stay with standard time all year round, right?
Yeah. And is this just Florida, or is this?
No, that's in the U.S. Senate. They passed that bill
for the country.
Yeah, for the whole country.
Wow.
Well, as much as they can, it would be for the railroad companies and any other interstate transportation common carriers of transportation. It would be for domestic airline flights and things like that.
It's all going to be linked in with like the real ID and,
Right. It's
okay. I don't have to travel anymore because I'm going to learn how to use interdimensional portals and by location.
There we go. Yeah. Now we're talking.
Whatever.
Yeah. Get into real-time travel. Yeah. Anyway, so Florida has passed this Sunshine Protection Act. Isn't that a weird title?
It's interesting. It's evocative, that's for sure. Protect it. Because everything's heroes. In danger. Everything's in danger of just going to complete shit. So we got to protect the sun.
Right. So if the United States Congress amends 15 USC section 260A, that's that one we were looking at before.
Yep.
Right here, daylight saving time. To authorize states to observe daylight saving time year round, it is the intent of the legislature, the Florida legislature, that daylight saving time shall be the year-round standard time of the entire state and all its political subdivisions. So I say that we repeal that act, and that
people even know this is happening. Like how do the people find out about this if they don't watch TV like me?
Find out about what?
That there's this thing called the Sunshine Protection Act, and that I could speak out against it.
Oh, you would have had to follow all the different bills happening in 2018. It was the 99th bill that got passed. It's shown right down here. I think that's what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it might not be, because it just says 2000. Yeah, I think it is, because some of these others are older chapters, 1915. Anyway, yeah, I think it was probably no, because that U.S. Senate bill was just a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, you'd have to look at the state legislature and what they're doing up there in Tallahassee.
But who does that? Like this is going to be something where most people have no idea, and then one day the governor is going to announce, like, hey, guess what's happening?
Well, right. That's, it's a good question. I guess people that don't watch TV a lot or at all, and are curious people, maybe somebody watching this will take it on themselves to get involved.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now that I know about it, now that it's like in my conscious mind, like, okay, well, what can be done? Because it does feel like when a change like this happens, it's basically just going to be passed. And although we have elected officials who are supposed to represent us, how do they know my opinion? How do they gauge their electorate or their constituency to determine, is everybody a yay or a nay? Like, do they have a meeting? Is it like, we need to send this out in some kind of a communication? I don't know.
This is why I think that state government is so much more important than federal government, is because there's a lot fewer people for each state representative, and so each of us have more say, more say in our representatives and what they're doing, and the state has all the power here in the state of Florida. The state legislature has all the power in Florida. It's
Yeah.
not the federal government. The federal
Right.
government has, every chance they've gotten, overstepped their boundaries, and the states have flipped their rights, and they're kind of like always bowing down. Oh yes, federal government, yeah, we'll just follow along with whatever you're doing, because we don't want to take the time and trouble to think about these things, and you've planned it all out, and yes, we'll just do as you say.
And it turns out the federal government wasn't even applying this to the 50 states. So that's another thing that's really interesting. They went ahead and said, "Oh, we're going to adopt it, even though we don't have to. We're going to do it anyway."
Right. Even though it only really applied to the federal government itself and to the interstate commerce carriers, common carriers. Yeah. So I wrote this sample bill that I'm now, after this discussion we just had, I'm going to have to modify it, but all this beginning part still applies. An act to end daylight saving time in Florida. Whereas the federal twice yearly 1 hour time change disrupts the work and rest schedules of Florida citizens. And whereas this twice yearly time change significantly increases fatal traffic accidents up to 30% on the day of commencing daylight saving time. And whereas daylight saving time leads to a short-term rise in workplace injuries, 5.7% after the spring daylight saving time shift, as employees sleep 40 minutes less on average. And whereas daylight saving time leads to elevated rates of acute myocardial infarction, up by about 3.9%. And whereas the intent of daylight saving time was to decrease electricity demand, yet daylight saving time has instead been shown to increase such demand, especially increasing air conditioner usage. And whereas daylight saving time puts the sun at its zenith between 12:52 p.m. in Pensacola and 1:23 p.m. in West Palm Beach, yet standard time balances the morning light hours and afternoon light hours, putting the sun at its zenith close to high noon throughout Florida. And whereas the citizens, businesses, and institutions of Florida are fully capable of adjusting their own meeting times and open hours by consensual agreement rather than be forced to artificially do so twice a year by federal law. Therefore, Florida Statute 1.02 is hereby amended, blah, blah, blah. So I amended.
I love it. This is awesome, David.
Yeah, it took a lot of research to
I can imagine. Yeah.
To figure all that
the
out.
Statistics, that's one thing nobody ever talks about, is the impact on the humans that are having to comply without question. So that's really beautiful. It's like compassionate. It brings in the human element to these rules, laws, statutes that just seem to be so antiseptic. It's like, it has nothing to do with humans. It's just do it because this is how it is. I mean, most people, I don't think, even question it.
Right. Exactly. So I sent this bill to my U.S. representative. I mean, I'm sorry, my state representative when I did this. I think it was around last August. Never heard back from them. But, maybe I'll run for state legislature.
Yeah, why not?
There's a whole lot more research that I would want to do before I got into that. But
I know. I mean, as soon as I say that, it's like, or not,
Yeah. Plus,
I think the system is going to change dramatically, and I could see wanting to participate more and be involved by running, but I almost feel like the majority of people on the outside of the government are going to be the ones putting the pressure on to make changes or just kind of pulling away, so I would rather be in that crowd that's kind of like, you guys do whatever you're going to do. We're going to do what we're going to do over here.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I would much prefer, instead of running for a state office, which is just gonna throw me into a swamp, a mired mess. I would rather teach people about something I've learned about called sociocracy, which we can do this from the ground up, organizing ourselves, and it's the full title of it is the Sociocratic Circle Organization Method, and we can network the whole world really with this way of coming to consensual agreements with each other.
And I attended a class where you talked about sociocracy. I had never heard of it before, other than like having a discussion with you previously. And I do believe that that's the way humanity is heading, because obviously this government business, it's just not, it's not scratching the itch when it comes to
right.
leadership and implementing, you know, agreed upon changes. And it's almost as if, who cares about the people, you know, because everybody's too busy. We just got to get these bills passed. And anyway, so I can't wait for that discussion, the sociocracy talk, and exposing people to that and helping them see that there's already like a template and we just have to practice it and you see its value.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have that one in there too. We've got a lot of discussions to come up.
Got some talks coming.
Yeah. So I'm so thankful for you for being my partner in doing these discussions, and yeah.
Absolutely. Well, do you feel like this is a good place to stop with this topic, or
it's a wrap? Yeah, it's a wrap.
Okay, it's a wrap. All right. Okay. Any
Ready?
Closing comments or anything, or let me know.
I'll let you do the closing comments because you're the one listening to all this stuff.
Well, I'm really fascinated. So my background, serving in the military for 20 years, I never thought to question anything about using well, I mean, I guess it made sense because we're dealing in a global environment and we're using Zulu time and the Julian calendar you mentioned. I was in the communications field and we did a lot with using the Julian time or Julian calendar. It's all kind of like a distant memory now, to be honest with you, but I knew we pulled it out and we had to figure stuff out and we wrote our reports and things. But for just average people who are used to, okay, what time is it? And a couple times a year we change the clock. It's just assumed that you have to, and it's like way over your head, a decision is made. And I think at the end of the day, it's disempowering. And the more that we learn that we have been told something that isn't really based in any type of authority, and we just comply, I think that's where people need to start looking at being super present every part of the day, all their lives. Like, where am I unnecessarily complying with some guidance that didn't come from me?
Right.
And that's what I'm learning. Of course, all the details of this, like looking at the law and the way you laid it out, it doesn't apply to anywhere other than the DC and all the territories, but yet the states then take it on. It's like, God, that's fascinating how the law is written. And I can't wait to talk more about that as we go through all these topic areas, because I know that that's where this is headed, is to continue to teach us. We're very compliant, very agreeable, and we need not be. We need to be more empowered and more connected with nature. Nature is the guide for us, and not the suit with the tie. You know, that's the Republican or the Democrat. It's like, okay, that's all very interesting, and I'm sure you mean well, but so
right, exactly.
Yeah, I did. I took some notes while you were talking. Even like what I was going to come back to is the idea of, like, again, my military experience, when we would pull watch or pull duty or whatever they would call it, this idea of someone being on watch, and then we wore watches. So how all those terminology origins, you know, they come together in this topic. And I think it's fascinating, because as we learn in the Course in Miracles and all the channeled material, that, you know, words are symbols of symbols, and a lot of our language is kind of spell casting anyway. And it's just funny how there's just no questioning it. We're just like, oh, I put my watch on, I know what time I have to change my watch when the time changes. So yeah, it's cool. It's like poetic for me.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. I want to close this out by playing this little song here.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, let's do it.
One day you'll look to see I've done what your mom and Rachel. I'll
follow the sun.
Yes.
Someday you'll know I was the one, but you left me, Rachel.
I'll follow the sun.
And now the time has come, and so my love, I must go. And though I lose a friend, in the end you will know. Oh, one day you'll find that I have gone, but you mark me, Rachel. I'll follow the sun.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, David. This was great. Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't even hear that it was still playing.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you. All right.
So
Bye-bye.
looking forward to our next discussion. We'll see everybody next time. I'm going to end the recording.
All right.